This is Season 4, Episode 15 of my modular journey, and today we're looking at the Chaos Devices Odessa Additive Synthesis Oscillator. It is the second in the huge oscillators I have purchased from Chaos Devices because, again, I love Chaos Devices. And it came in at the same time as Sophia, mid-December 2023, and it cost $559. Enormous module, enormous price tag. Now, I realize Odessa is over 6 years old, and most modular enthusiasts have already discovered this particular device, but this is me we're talking about, slowly walking the path on my modular journey. So for me, Odessa is brand spanking new. So what is Odessa? This is my first ever additive oscillator, which is totally opposite of my current knowledge of subtractive synthesis, that being you start with a waveform and you subtract harmonic content from it. Odessa and additive synthesis starts with a base waveform, a fundamental, and you add harmonic content or partials, and Odessa offers up to 2,560 harmonic partials across its spectrum. Odessa offers controls to manipulate the harmonic spectra, as they call it, through partials and how those are distributed and shaped both individually as well as mixed together via parameters like tilt and tension. When modulation is added, for automation, is when this module seems to come alive, creating some pretty astounding sounds that bend reality, well, at least for me. Lastly, it's worth mentioning Odessa supports 1, 3, or 5 voices that you can spread across the stereo spectrum through the odd and even partials. And with the Hell expander, you can even control the pitch of those 3 to 5 voices individually, which really opens up Odessa as an amazing source of sound in my modular system. Why did I finally choose to pick up Odessa? Similar to the Sophia reasoning, I'm just a big fan of Chaos Devices. And though Odessa is 6 years old now, I rarely see this module used in modular performance patches or even demonstrated outside the initial launch in 2019. I am 99.999% a subtractive synthesis kind of kid, so when it comes to this mysterious additive sorcery, I literally own no hardware to really try to understand that. I'm not interested in Buchla design modular systems, which, if I understand correctly, is based on additive, versus the Moog style synthesis, which is subtractive. So what's the difference, you ask? Again, my very basic understanding is subtractive starts with a fully harmonic waveform like a sawtooth, and you use filters to subtract these harmonics, versus additive, where you start with a basic waveform and add numerous sinusoidal components or harmonic partials to create, as they say, unique and otherworldly tones. So that sounded pretty exciting to me. Odessa also has the Hell expander, which provides paraphonic generation of an additional 3 to 5 voices for chords. And that in itself was a big selling point for me, having a single module with unique tones that I can make complex chords with using Symphonian or Ornament and Crime chord generators. As far as how I will use Odessa, my main use case for Odessa will be to explore additive synthesis, really. And then to see what I can get out of the Hell expander and the 1 voice, 3 voice, and 5 voice paraphonic chords. And of course the many CV modulation points, and again, Chaos Devices are just famous for self-patching madness that will ensue, and I really love these devices. Let's take a look at the interface and listen to what Odessa sounds like. Note, I will be quoting directly from the manual in some of these cases because I literally know nothing about additive synthesis outside of general philosophies. So let's walk the panel. First, I like to start with pitches, which is volt per octave tracked, of course, and it is a -5 to a +10 volt input range, so that's pretty huge. I'm going to grab some pitch data from Marbles over here and listen to what this sounds like. This is our fundamental, and then these are our odd partials and even partials. As I start tweaking them, I'll bring those in. Coarse tuning, of course, is right here. Of course, coarse tuning, which is a 16 hertz to 20 kilohertz. That's pretty wide as well. And then there's a fine tuning knob right here. Currently I have it set to C4, so we'll leave it alone. I'm going to add a splash of reverb just so it doesn't sound so dead. The module also has exponential and linear FM here with a CV jack and an attenuator for both. If I take a sample and hold, for instance, and plug it into exponential, What we're going to hear is additional voltages on top of pitch volt per octave, which sounds silly, of course. Well, that opposed to linear. I'll get down to the linear stuff in just a minute. There's a big old fat partials knob here in the center, which goes from 1 to 512 partials per voice. So times 5 voices is where you get the 2,560 harmonic partials. Turning down this knob eliminates harmonic partials from the sound, while turning it up adds partials, as you would expect. At the minimum setting, only the fundamental can be heard on the odd and even partials. There's also a statement in the manual describing automatic volume compensation, where the more partials you add, the quieter the lower frequencies become, and I imagine this is to keep the module from becoming overbearing to your ears. So just to hear what some of these partials sound like for real quick, I'm going to turn up Spectral Tilt to the middle. I'm going to turn up the partials knob. And you can see here, the fundamental is staying smooth while the 2 partial channels are being changed. The knob I was just messing with here is called, the big red knob is called Spectral Tilt, and it has a CV jack right here, an unattenuated CV jack. This is where those increases and decreases are controlled. In the middle, partials amplitude decreases slowly, and at the minimum setting, the decrease is very rapid. So that's why it sounds just like the fundamental. At the maximum, the amplitude spectrum is flat, and it could result in buzzy, narrow pulse waveforms. Very narrow. The next knob up here is density, which also has CV and an attenuator slider. Density, warp, and peaking work together to determine a comb-like frequency response that affects the spectrum. Density controls how dense the notches are in the comb. Every other, or alternating partial, is filtered out by the warp setting. Let's look at that real quick. Now I am running data over here, but I don't know what I'm looking at, so maybe you do. That's why it's running over here. I'm not really going to reference this except to show it visually. Now the warp knob has also another CV and slider here, and this controls the uniformity of the comb response from a linear dispersion, where all the combs are equidistant, through a very non-linear response, where the notches are very dense at the bottom, but become more distant for higher frequencies. Now in my ears, listen to this. And then if I turn the density knob, they sound the same, don't they? So I'm not sure what the difference between the two of those are. And then finally in this little trio of knobs here we have peaking, and peaking controls the shape of the comb response from narrow notches through wide notches with narrow peaks at the maximum position. And you can hear here we're starting to get into interesting tones. There's also this tension knob over here, and the manual says this is a very important setting. So let me read directly from the manual since I am not quite understanding the language. Tension determines whether the sinusoidal partials generated by Odessa adhere to a harmonic pattern wherein frequencies are strictly integer multiples of the fundamental frequency. I have no idea what that means. Do you? Please let me know what that means, because I have no idea. Instead, we're just going to listen to what it sounds like. The manual again says tension set to sharp, which is above middle. Partials are spread more apart. So let's watch the meter here. I can hear something, I don't know what it's doing though. And then below middle, the partials are more condensed, creating a non-harmonic cluster that may resemble noise. My big pause in the way. So that's interesting. These are pretty sensitive. Yeah, that's definitely interesting. All right, so moving on real quick here. There are these three outputs at the bottom. One of them is for fundamental, which is the green trace here. The next one is for the odd partials, blue trace, and even partials, the red trace. They're going into my channels 1, 2, and 3. Here's the fundamental. And no matter what you turn and twiddle with here, the fundamental just stays what it is, because it is the fundamental. The odd partials are in your left ear. And likewise, the even partials are in your right ear. This kind of reminds me, additive synthesis, at least so far, reminds me of laying all your arms on an organ. You know, a pipe organ. I could just fiddle with this all day. All right, moving along from that. So there's one bummer about Odessa, and that is the accursed jumper on the back bullshit that you know how much I hate from the Doper modules. The fundamental here can be a sine wave or a square wave, and unfortunately the only way to switch these is to pull the module out and move a jumper on the back. It's a bummer that the Hell expander here didn't just come with a switch, since it is an expander for Odessa. Hindsight? I don't know. I won't be demonstrating the differences because I'm not pulling the module out. Moving along, there are these two knobs here and CV jacks at the top called bank length and harmonic factor. This is where the module kind of loses me. And the manual does try to explain their use, but I'm not grasping it yet. I refer you to the manual for the technical details, but here's an audio representation of how these knobs affect the partials. When the bank is at 12 o'clock or 0, the harmonic factor affects both outputs, odds and even partials. And I don't know if you can see on the display here, but there's a ratio on the left side, and then there's I'm assuming a multiplier or something on the right side. So the bank length has a negative side and a positive side. When it's set to +1, each output offers the same fundamental plus its even 2/4/6 and odd 3/5/7 overtones. I mean, that kind of makes sense, to my ears anyway. It sounds wider. But this is also wider because I have these two channels panned left and right, by the way. Odd and even are panned left and right. So you hear the odd partials are not going up, but the even partials are. I think that's what that means. Odd partials will go down, maybe? Nope, because we're at +1. So how do I get that to work? Do I have to do minus? That's right. All right, so at least I understand that. The bank select is at -1 over here. Then the odd partials will be changed, but the even won't. Okay, so at least I understand the control. That's why when it's at 0, it affects both. Ooh, crunchy. So if I wasn't feeding pitches in, what would happen? See, and this is where Modular loses me, because I can just sit here for hours doing this. All right, where was I? Back on task. So now we can talk about the voices button over here. There's a voices button and a spread knob over here. These two again work together. Odessa can generate 1 voice, 3 voices, or 5 voices using the voices button on the front panel, and the voices are affected by the spread knob. When in the green mode, which is a single voice, a spread and its CV have no effect. When it's in orange mode, which is 3 voices, a spread will detune the 2 voices surrounding the central voice, and 5 voices is the same, where there will be 5 voices spread out instead. So let's hear what that sounds like. For that, let me plug my pitches back in. All right, so here we're in single voice mode, and spread, of course, does nothing. Turn on 3 voice mode, and listen to the stereo effect. And spread can get kind of wacky. And then, of course, five voice. I'm guessing spread is like just a detune. So it adds a little bit of stereo width to the sound. And of course, as always, I love modulating things, so let me start doing some of that. I want to modulate spread just a little. I'm going to use Batumi up here with the attenuation. And then I think I want to also modulate density and warp. I'll do full modulation there, and then just attenuate it down here on the module itself. So I'm noticing, at least in the way I have it patched, I'm still hearing the fundamental pretty clearly. If I take it out of the mixer, you can still hear the fundamental fine. If I put the fundamental in, I actually start distorting. But I mean, this sounds pretty cool. I kind of like that. So I skipped over the linear FM because for some reason it's later in the manual and I was writing this script top to bottom. The linear FM and its slider here are similar in functionality to the exponential FM mentioned earlier. This offers a linear modulator for the pitch. There's some mention in the manual about how this can be used to create clangorous FM sounds. I like clangorous. It doesn't tell me how to though. So if I was to try adding that to my pitches, what do I get? That even makes sense to me. So what I think is going on is I have a second channel of pitches coming out of marbles over here, and it is linearly going from whatever pitch it is to the new pitch. So you hear it kind of swoopy a little bit, or unstable. I don't think it's clangorous, but we'll see. So the spectrum analyzer, which is again something I don't exactly understand because it's not a meter. I don't think it's a meter like audio VU meter or anything. Hold on, let me turn this down. This is a multicolor LED that demonstrates the various power levels of the signals at each of the 12 bands. I'm going to toss another picture up over here about what these 12 bands are because I'm not going to read them. The manual goes on to state that there are only 12 LEDs, so the display is crude compared to how much dynamic diversity is going on, of course. The LEDs are also color-coded, but there's no mention of what the power level each color represents. I'm assuming green is good, yellow is hot, and red is blazing. So there's a ton more technical detail in the manual, so I strongly encourage you to go to the Odessa page and download the PDF and dive in. I do not yet understand the bulk of this additive synthesis module, so my explanations here are very brief. Sorry about that. Maybe once I learn more, I can revisit this in depth. Odessa is 6 years old, though, and there's plenty of other people that have already covered this module. Check out the demos and the reviews in the video description for some of my favorites. All right, hang on a moment. I need to make some noise. I don't think that crackling is audio. I don't think I'm distorting or clipping. Nothing is read on any of the meters. So I think this is just Odessa itself. I'm going to turn down the pitch here. I'm telling you, this is where I get completely lost in modular, and it's not just Odessa or Sophia or Benjamin V2 or any of these other, even Belgrade as a filter. I could just get lost listening to these sounds. that just come out of nowhere. And they sound absolutely amazing. I am so hooked. In case you hadn't noticed, I'm on my 4th year with this stuff. I'm still learning every single day. And it never gets boring. It is never boring. Is that even possible, to find something that is so cool that it's never boring? I don't even have that experience with human beings. I guess that's it for the Chaos Devices Odessa Additive Synthesis Oscillator. That's it for this episode. I've got probably years of learning ahead of me for what these incredible wave shapes do. So anyway, sorry, I started to talk like an influencer there, with every word being enunciated like William Shatner. All right, really, that's it. Coming up next is my replacement for marbles, which I've been using all along. It's a little device here called Kara. It's by Afterlater Audio, so stay tuned for hopefully a better dive into marbles.